Okay, so welcome everybody. Happy Thursday. I finally know what day of the week it is, which is kind of an unusual thing now that we're still in quarantine. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with PowerToFly. I'm super excited to get started with today's session and introduce you to our speakers. But before we do, I'm going to go over some real quick housekeeping items for you all. My name's Meg, by the way, and I'm part of the marketing team here at PowerToFly, and I will be your host today. Today's session, like all of our sessions, is all about our audience, all about participation, all about you. So to that effect, please feel free to participate. You can turn cameras on, you can come off of mute to ask questions or voice comments about what you're about to hear. If you don't, for whatever reason, want to show up on the live recording of this event, not a problem, you can still participate. So when you do that, to participate, what you'll do is you'll put your comments or questions into the Zoom group chat. Keep yourself on mute, you won't show up in the recording. I'll make sure that all the comments and questions that get raised in the chat get addressed in today's session. And what else? Oh, if you want to ask your question or comment anonymously, not a problem. Instead of sending it to everyone in the Zoom group chat, you'll use that little drop-down menu and pick Meg Alexander as the recipient, and I'll field questions and comments in there. And then if you are going to come off mute to ask a question or comment, I'm fair game. Please feel free to interrupt me because I get paid to fill the silence. But if Betsy's speaking or if another one of our attendees is asking a question, try to avoid crosstalk, that kind of thing. It's just helps us use your best practices. And then if you are not actively speaking, make sure that you are on mute. You never know what kind of sounds are going to show up in the background. I've got 3 dogs running around the house, so if I'm not talking, I will be on mute as well. If I mute you, don't worry, it's not permanent. You can still unmute yourself to ask a question. It's just trying to make sure that the audio stays uncontaminated for everybody that's listening. Today's session is being recorded. We talked about this a little bit earlier today, but if you register for this session, whether you don't attend, you spend 5 minutes on the chat, or you stay for the full duration, everybody who registers gets an email in about 1 to 2 business days with a link to rewatch today's session. So that link is stable, it is always free, it's shareable, so you can send it around. Say you hear something on today's session that would really resonate with somebody you know, please feel free to send that around. It's always free to watch. The videos get hosted on our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to, or on our website basically in perpetuity. So feel free to kind of spread the love and the knowledge about PowerToFly. You can also keep up with us on all of our other social media platforms. We are at PowerToFly on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And I'm super excited to get started. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will keep moving right along. I'm really excited to introduce you to today's speaker. Betsy has been in the security industry for over 16 years, working on everything from incident response to security architecture at both startups and Fortune 500 companies. Betsy is currently the Vice President of Information Security at Chainalysis, Inc., a blockchain security company where she is responsible for establishing the security, strategy, and direction for the company. Prior to joining Chainalysis, Betsy built and matured security teams at companies such as Facebook, eBay, and Independent Health. So welcome, Betsy.
Thank you, Meg. It's great to be here, and welcome to everybody. I'd love to see all the cities represented here today.
Absolutely. All right, so before we get started here, I do just want to do a quick call out, and I'll be putting this link up in the Zoom chat, but you can follow Chainalysis on PowerToFly. So I'll put a link in there. You can navigate to their company page. There'll be a big pink follow button at the top of their page. Clicking that follow button does a couple things. First thing, it puts you on their follow network, which tells Chainalysis that you are interested in them. You're interested in what they're doing. You're interested in what they're hiring for. You're interested in working for them. It's a really good way to kind of make yourself known, especially if you don't see anything, any postings listed that would suit you. So on that same page, you can also scroll down, see what their open roles look like. And then the other thing that does is clicking them and adding them to your follow network means that you get alerted every time they post new roles or they participate in events like today, or say our upcoming mini summit, our virtual job fair that's happening next Friday. Any of those events you will find out about. And it doesn't clutter up your mini feed. It's just a really good way to stay updated. And you can do that for any company that you like on PowerToFly. You can follow and unfollow as many companies as you want, change the settings as often as you want. No harm, no foul. So I'll put the link to that page into the Zoom chat, and so everybody can go ahead and check that out. As we get started here, we do have all the questions that you guys had submitted prior to today's session. There were a lot of them and they were really good. So thank you so much to all of our attendees who sent in such wonderful questions. We compiled all those questions, took out redundant ones, and condensed them down into more of a conversational format. So we're going to start pinging through those questions in just a minute here. As we do that, if you are on today's session and you want to make sure that your question is asked, please feel free. Like I said, come off mute. You can put it into the Zoom chat, not a problem. Just make sure that we just want to be sure that if you had a question, you get your answer because you took the time out of your day to spend with us. So thank you for that. So as we get started here, Betsy, the first question that was submitted, how did you decide whether you've outgrown a position? How do you go about finding a job that aligns with your values, passion, and has a good work environment?
Yeah, this is a good one to start with. So I think there are two questions here. The first one is deciding or the decision process of how you know when you have outgrown a position. And for me, I can definitely feel when it's ready to move on when I'm going to work and I'm not feeling challenged. That is a good indicator that I don't have the growth that I'm looking for. And that's when I start to get a little antsy and I start figuring out, what else is out there. Finding a job that it aligns with your passion and your values. What I found, it takes a self-audit for you to actually narrow down on what are the things that you really care about. And I think one of the beauty of working or how we work today is that there's a lot of good information out there about companies already. So if I'm interested in a specific company, there are lots of resources that are at my fingertips that I can start to look at, what are employees saying about this company, for instance, on Glassdoor. Now, you do have to take some of those testimonials with a grain of salt because you don't have the full context. And so it's looking for different areas where you can find information about the company, looking at their pages, social media pages, understanding what changes are happening and what interesting problems they're solving. And then can you see yourself working in that industry? And I think I had to go through that process when earlier this year when I was thinking about coming over to Chainalysis. So I've been there now for about 7 months. And one of the things that really attracted me to the company is looking at some of the stories of how the platform was being used to find malicious actors. And for me, that was my passion was, how can we use technology to help people's lives? And so looking at those indicators and just looking at where the company is positioned and the kinds of interesting cases that, that these products that Chainalysis builds helps was really important to me to help make that or inform that decision.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it can feel really confusing for people, and it's such a subjective thing, but that idea of if you're not being challenged, you're not really growing at all. I think that's something that is really important and gets lost really quickly when people are thinking about changing jobs, because I feel like a lot of times it can be more of an idea of well, I need to make more money or I want to be doing something different, but that can all be, it's one of those things that kind of pales if you're doing something that's challenging and you feel engaged. It's not that those other things don't matter, but it's not as much of a deciding factor, I guess. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
All right, so this next person had asked, I'm making a career change, going from being a director at a high growth startup, so SaaS, software as a service company, to being a senior analyst at a global company. How can I make the most of that opportunity to ensure that I will still be able to obtain a leadership role in the future?
Yeah, so fairly similar to some of the changes that I made myself, but I was going the opposite direction from a large company to a startup. What I love about working in a high growth startup, especially if it's a SaaS or a cloud company, you are probably wearing multiple hats. Today you're probably working or helping something on the HR side, and then on the finance side, you get a chance to have your fingers in in a lot of different areas when you're in a startup, just because the pool of people who are at the company, it's probably a smaller company, but the problems are a lot. The complex problems to solve are a lot. So having that experience and bringing that to a larger organization, you are actually at an advantage because you have this broad view of a business. You understand what it's like to scale a company. And you might be at an advantage depending on what your colleagues, what their experiences are, where maybe they've grown up the traditional path in a very specialized area. So the thing that you will bring to that organization is your ability to hopefully build relationships across different teams, because you have empathy for the other teams and what they might be going through. I often see, especially in a large organization, it can be really hard to get cross-functional collaboration if you don't have those relationships built in. And a lot of that is just when we're, in a very transactional environment, you have your responsibilities that you need to get done, and you can sometimes forget that the people on the other side or on the other team that you have to collaborate with on a specific goal are also having some of those same challenges. So, coming from a startup, you're looking at things very broadly and horizontally, and you can definitely bring that view into a more into a larger organization, and then help to bridge those gaps.
Is there anything to remember when you're taking what could be viewed as kind of a step back on like a leadership scale? Is there anything to really remember about how to position that, or how to talk about it when you're going into maybe an interview to kind of move back up the leadership ladder? I feel like that's a lot of the reason why people are hesitant to do take a step like this, because they worry that if you take what seems to be a step back, how do you then explain, well, no, I do want to keep moving up?
Yeah, and so that, when we look at our society that we live in today, there's a lot of value placed on titles. It brings with it, there's a sense of pride that, oh, wow, look, you worked your way up, into this organization, and then maybe you're taking a role that is a step down. And I remember multiple times getting asked, because I interview a lot of people for the companies that I'm working at, but I also, even myself during the interview process, would often get questions like, why would anybody take a step back? And for me, it ended up being a very strategic move, because I knew that I always wanted to end up in a company that was dealing with or addressing interesting security challenges. And I knew that I wasn't going to get that in my current role, because the scope of my experience would be very limited to a very specific industry, which was healthcare at the time. And so having to sit in those meetings or interviews and having people almost have this cognitive dissonance where they're saying, this is an anti-pattern. Nobody really ever does this. But for me, explaining that this is not about how I can, rise up an organization in a very vertical manner. For me, what is interesting and where I get my passion from is looking at problems more broadly and understanding how I can have a varied set of experiences that will then at least make me a better leader when that time comes. And so it's all about explaining or packaging why you're taking this step that is, seemingly abnormal, in a way that people can then understand, well, it's not just about, this vertical rise, it's looking at problems more broadly, identifying solutions that are more strategic, rather than just, this is how I've come up and this is my way of thinking and this is how I'm going to address this. So I hope that gets to closer to at least the answer that you were looking for on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And as we go through these, guys, or ladies, I should say, as we go through these questions, if this is a question that you submitted and you feel like more context is necessary, or that maybe we're not heading in the direction that you hoped that we would go with this, please feel free to come off mute and give more context. You can also put it in the Zoom group chat, because I monitor that while we're talking. So please feel free to do so. So this person writes, I have been actively applying to make a lateral move for almost 2 years with no bite. I use my cover letter as my main tool to do this, but what are other ways to showcase that I'm confident in my ability to do the job I'm applying for in a way that hiring managers understand?
Yeah, so, I think there's a lot of debate about how effective cover letters are in today's job market. And I've looked at, I think there's two sides of it. Cover letters are important when you have to explain something that might, look odd to a hiring manager or recruiting. So for instance, if you have a large gap, or for instance, if you, I think in the case of this person is asking where they're looking to make a lateral move, the cover letter might be useful in explaining, well, I did all this work, but I have a passion, or I think I can contribute, or I can help in this other industry. So some other options might be looking at a platform like LinkedIn or any of these. There's so many digital communities today where people can brand themselves. I feel like we're in this age today with social media where we have all at some point had to become branding experts, right? And so you get to write your own story or how people see you when or how you show up online. And so it might be that you start posting some of the work that you've done that is relevant to a hiring manager. I know that when I'm seriously looking at a candidate, I will look at if they're techie, or if it's an engineering candidate, I will look at their contributions on the open source. So I'll go to GitHub or any of these other sites just to see, or does this person have a presence where they've done some public speaking that shows me, yeah, I'm really passionate about this and I'm contributing to the community, whether it's doing it digitally or doing it in person. So there are definitely ways in which you can position yourself. Obviously, you need to have the talent, and you've done the work to back it up, because we don't want to create this aura of an amazing, whatever the industry you're in or whatever that role is, and then you get into the interview process and you can't, back that up. So it's just hone in on what your strengths are, and then don't be afraid to, just step out into those conversations. A lot of things happen on Twitter as well. It really depends on the industry that you're in and how you can start to just share and show that you're, providing an impact or some value to the community.
Thank you for calling that out, because I think that's a really good thing that most people don't really know, is that like when you're being reviewed, especially if you are really in consideration for something, those little extras are things that hiring managers look for. Yeah. And from my background as a talent advocate before I was part of the marketing team here, one of the key places that I always looked for, and I'd like to tell other people to look for, is check out that headline on LinkedIn. It can be a really easy place to showcase, like if you're trying to change industries, or if you are looking to, make a shift from this department to more of this kind of role, if you want to be less people focused and more tech focused, it's a really good place to call that out, is in your headline. And if you are in a position where maybe you don't want it known that you're looking around, that's where your PowerToFly profile can do wonders for you, because unlike your LinkedIn profile, it's not searchable by the general public. The only people that see that profile are inside people like, admins from PowerToFly or hiring managers from our partner companies. So it's a really good place. And I think it's called like either About Me or Your Story is the section on the PowerToFly page, where you can call out things like this and say, like, I'm looking to make a lateral move. You can be really direct and straightforward, connect those dots, or that person's going to look at your resume or look at your profile in the most straightforward and easiest way possible.
Absolutely. Because if you don't ask, the answer will always be no, right? So put yourself out there, let the world know that this is a move that you're looking to make. And I love, PowerToFly as a platform does give you that that avenue, because again, yes, LinkedIn is very public, and if your employer you don't want to share that information with your employer, then there's definitely other avenues in which you can take.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to this next question, this person wanted to know, what are your thoughts on growing your career as an individual contributor? Can you be ambitious and still feel fulfilled as an IC?
Yeah, that's a good one. So we have to answer the question about what fulfillment means for you. So for most traditional organizations, and I think a lot of this is starting to change now, where we keep talking about this path of like you're gonna grow in your career, and it's for you to get successful, you have to lead a team or be a people manager. But I've seen a change, especially with tech companies, and that's where a majority of my experiences. So a lot of the advice or the comments I make are sort of based in that experience. But a lot of tech companies figured out early that not everybody makes an excellent manager or even a good manager, right? Management, just like any other discipline, is a craft that has to be honed and done. If it's to be done well, it has to be done well over time. So there are different paths that you can take. There are principal roles where you may not have responsibility over a team, but you are still working on very broad and high level, high profile kinds of projects where you might not be responsible for people's day-to-day work, but you are their lead. You're the person that they look to for inspiration. Whether, if you're on the engineering side, you're the person who's bringing in that wealth of education and saying, hey, I've seen this before. I built X platform, and these are the challenges that we saw. In order to avoid that, here's where we need to invest in it. So you're helping not just your direct team, but also the leadership, and helping to make, or as another data point or as a resource to help make decisions on the direction of that team or the company. So it really depends on what fulfillment means for you. It could also just be, how do you grow and in a specialized area? So if it's finance, or if it's sales and marketing, you can absolutely be the best at that thing, and that that's where your growth happens, is you have mastered or you're on the path to mastering a certain discipline.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to consider, is what exactly does fulfillment look like for you? And for those of you who asked this question, I know there were a couple different questions that kind of flirted around this issue. I've put some more links into the chat where you can check out past chats that we've had that focus on this topic, about whether you should be in management or as an IC, how to navigate that engineering career path, and how to transition from an IC into management. So please feel free to check those out. Again, they're all free to watch, and you can always save them for later. So this next question was a little bit longer, but I thought it was really interesting. This person says, I'm currently a cybersecurity student in a BS program that is transitioning careers after a decade in GIS. As I don't have any true IT work experience, what advice would you have to be able to maximize my potential and my earnings in the field? And as a secondary question, they wrote, I'm concerned that moving into a help desk type position after graduation could potentially lead to another career dead end.
Yeah, so two things. One is, I'm excited to field a question about somebody in cybersecurity. Obviously, it's a field that I have dedicated my life's work to, so wonderful. You're on the right path. And second, I actually started out in help desk. So I don't put this in my profile because we're talking about many years ago, and it certainly gave me a path into security. So when I started in this field, there weren't a lot of security jobs. And so for me, the best decision at that time was to get any job that had a technology side to it. So I started off at the help desk, and I learned quite a bit about just users and how to build empathy for users when you're building security controls. So there was definitely a benefit out of taking that job, and it definitely was not a dead end. However, I just want to make sure that I'm looking at the question and answering as it's asked. I don't have any true IT work experience, and I'm assuming GIS means Geography Information Systems. So we'll just go with that. And so my assumption is, if you're coming from a GIS background with 10 years, take a look at how that experience will then map into some of the roles that are in cybersecurity. So today, there's everything from, I see data scientists moving into cybersecurity, because when you think about where we are, social, mobile, cloud, big data, and especially I want to focus on big data. We have people interacting with machines. We have machines interacting with other machines. And all of these conversations, when you're a security person, you're charged with understanding how you can better make use of that data, visualize it, right, and then help to make decisions on whether your systems are secure. So there is absolutely a space for people who have this experience of looking at diverse data sets and then helping to tune those data sets into making true business value, to bring in true business value. So that's the direction I would go into, is if you've got that statistical background, it can be very useful in incident response, threat intelligence. This is a problem that in security we need to solve anyway. And so there is definitely a lot of impact to be had in that space. All right.
Thank you for detailing all that out. I know it can be kind of confusing, especially if you're just starting off and you only see one specific career path. It's really helpful to know from somebody who's in the industry what actually your potential really looks like. So thank you for that. So this is honestly a favorite kind of evergreen question of mine. It wasn't posed by me though, so I was really interested and glad somebody else wanted to know it as well. What do you really love about your current role?
Yeah, one of the reasons I got into security is because I realized quickly that, over time, security would become one of those really hot and exciting fields. And so about my role, so today no day looks the same. What I love about it is just the diversity of different things that I have to work on. So an example is in the morning, I could be talking to our sales team about helping them, respond to a questionnaire from a potential customer. In the afternoon, I might be sitting in a meeting with a number of engineers, and we're talking about how to, address a specific security issue, or maybe build out a feature, and they want to do, something called threat modeling, which is, how would somebody attack this? And maybe the next day I'm talking to our legal team about, some of the trends that they're seeing when it comes to data protection and regulations globally. So in 1 week, I've had lots of really interesting, deep conversations with people that don't look the same, right? And so for me, that is really energizing, because I love when my brain is stretched. I do also have to be careful about that though, because by the end of the week, I probably can't put a sentence together just because of how, my brain is buzzing. So, long story short here, for me, it's really about the people and just getting to interact with a large group of folks over time. So, yeah.
Excellent. If you don't mind taking a question kind of off the cuff, we had one that was submitted in the chat while you were speaking, and it does sound very interesting. This person's saying, I just turned 47. I have a degree in electrical engineering. I spent my first 14 years in engineering and the last about 7 years being in a diversity staffing program manager, because they're passionate about D&I.
Yeah.
I recently returned to the engineering side of my company as a technical PM. I'm finding that I really don't like being a PM in this space. It's so ambiguous and stressful, and I find myself missing my days of testing in the lab. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. What would you suggest for someone like me to help figure out what comes next?
Yeah, so I've been in that space where I just wasn't sure that I was, going on the right path. And one of the things I actually did was I ended up getting a career coach. I realized very quickly. So I am married. I have a husband, and I was trying to use him as my career coach. And I would sit and ask these questions, and he would look at me and say, "I don't know." And so I ended up, just making the investment in myself and saying, this is important to me. I need to have somebody who has, had these similar kinds of conversations. And so what this person did for me, so it wasn't like there was any like huge, earth-shattering changes that happened. They just taught me to look at a problem or to look at this situation that I was in from an objective perspective. So, it started off with do an audit of the things that you love or the things that you when you feel powerful doing something, note what that thing is. And I think it's a different way of thinking through what a strength is. A strength isn't your traditional, like, it might not even necessarily be something you're really good at, because you might be amazing at being a TPM, but you're not energized by it. So if you're getting home at the end of the day and you're drained, start thinking about what those activities are that are making you drained. And so, I worked with this person for a series of I think it was about 3 months, and we would just go through, the week. What made you feel strong? What made you feel weak? And then, what are the roles in which that you can start to do more of the things that make you energized and less of the things that make you feel weak. So, I don't have a lot of, like earth-shattering, advice here. It's more of just take the time for yourself to understand what are those things that are really important to you, and then figure out how you can transition that into a full-time role. I think that's the best way for me to put it. But working with a coach is definitely another is an avenue that I took, and I had to talk myself into it, because it was should I be spending this money? But it was worthwhile.
I think that's a really good thing to call out, right? Is that it's an investment in yourself, and it's one of those situations where, yeah, like you have these people that you trust their opinion and whatever, but do they have the knowledge necessary to really help direct you? Or are they really people that you should bounce your ideas off of like, maybe I want to do this and maybe I want to do that? Yeah. When you don't really know what you want to do and don't really know which direction you should go, seek out a career coach, especially one that has training in that area, like somebody that specializes maybe in engineering or specializes in your industry. Yeah. That's the kind of person that could really help direct you. And maybe it's a situation where a mentor would be a good idea, but if you don't know yet where your direction is headed, it can be really hard to try and find a mentor when you don't know. It's not that you don't know what path to take, you don't know what your end goal like what you want your end goal to be. So yeah, thank you for saying that.
Can I just interrupt and say that it's Caroline Broussard. I really appreciate that question being asked. I'm also in my 40s and changing careers. So I really appreciate being in the company of someone else. There are a lot of us out there, but it can feel a little bit isolating, especially in the times we're in now. So I certainly appreciate the question, and particularly Betsy's answer. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you so much for sharing. And I do just want to call out, we are holding, in a couple of weeks from now, we're going to be holding another icebreaker session for job seekers to kind of prevent that burnout that everybody goes through. So keep your eyes peeled on our upcoming events, because we're going to be scheduling out some more of those. And it can be a really nice way to connect with other people that are either job seeking or changing industries, especially due to COVID right now. There's a lot of them. So please feel free to check that out. It's a nice way to spend 30 minutes, kind of blow off some steam, recharge yourself a little bit, and also be in the company of other people that are going through what you're going through. Because like Caroline said, it can feel really isolating when you're not really sure, but everybody around you seems to be like, well, I know what I'm doing. So thank you for sharing, Caroline.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Caroline.
So we've got another question in here. This woman says, I'm in my 50s and I've been working in the not-for-profit sector for the past 10 plus years. This sector has taken a hard hit because of COVID-19, making fundraising even harder. I'm tired and anxious to get out of this industry, but feeling stuck, deflated, and overwhelmed. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, so I think we can all just take a pause and realize, we're living in a really challenging time. I think that sometimes 2020 can feel like just a barrage of negative news. And a lot of that is, the response to that of being anxious is fairly normal, because we're dealing with some questions that are, the answers might be unknowable, right? Especially now, if there are people with school-age kids who are on the call, there's lots of really tough decisions to make under uncertainty. And I've often felt, this sense of despair as well, because when you look at what's happening in the economy, there are lots of people who are losing jobs. There's some industries that have been hit really hard, right? If you're in the service industry, if you're in the non-for-profit industry, if you're fundraising, this can be really a tough time. So for me, suggestions are what I focused on, and I still have to work on that today, is taking one day at a time and realizing that I have some set of things that I can control. And as long as I'm gainfully employed, it might be a good time to take a pause and start thinking about what other resources are available to you. If you have, if you're in fundraising or non-for-profit, they are the things that took you there to that industry. And over time, you've built out probably some strengths in that are, again, transferable to another industry, if that is the path that you want to take. I think I have to keep reminding myself that this will end, right? At some point, COVID won't be our story. The arc will come to an end, and we'll get to a new normal. And then, this might be a good time for us to just take a pause and think, once that new normal comes in, will I be ready to take on whatever the next path for me is? I think, COVID has given us quite a lot to think about and start to think, strip away and figure out what is really important for us. So, in terms of just suggestions, it's like we have lots of digital platforms where you can connect with people, and then understand what resources are available for you to move out of the industry, if that's what you end up deciding.
Absolutely. We also have one of my coworkers, Nicole, is in the chat right now, dropping some links so that you can check out our upcoming coffee breaks. We've also got a mock interview networking event that we're doing. So please feel free to come to those. It might help you kind of reset a little bit and realize, if you're talking to somebody else, but it's in a low pressure or no pressure environment, it can be really helpful to help develop what you actually feel, as opposed to, most people only get that kind of chance to talk about, like, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years in terms of an interview? So it can be a nice way to really think about what's maybe on your plate options wise. And you're right, it can be so hard to make decisions, especially when you're in the middle of that panic. I don't know if it's kind of a little bit of my like depression talking, but I tend to make decisions based on, well, what's the worst possible outcome of this choice, and can I live with that? If you can, okay, fine, because who knows, it might turn out way better, and if it totally fails, you can live with that outcome. But if you can't, then maybe you do a little bit of more risk assessment and see, like, okay, well, what could I live with?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because it really is a risk assessment at the end of the day.
Yeah, and actually, Nicole's making a really good point. We have had a lot of ageism chats happening recently, especially about like overcoming ageism in your job search, and how to really address those issues that plague a lot of our older members, which is like, you've got all this experience, you shouldn't feel like you don't have options. It's a lot of time put in and time spent in the trenches that the young whippersnappers don't have. So, please try and remember that you really do have a lot of value and a lot of good things that you're bringing to the table.
Yeah, and there are some companies that also have started piloting interesting programs, career switching programs. About 2 years ago, I worked with a lady who was running a program out of Berkeley, and she was looking to train, I don't know whatever happened to the program, but she was looking to train people coming out of the law field. So this would be paralegals or maybe even just attorneys, and into cybersecurity. And she was running this program where you go into a class and you start to learn about some of the interesting legal challenges that are taking place in the data protection space. And then, at the end of the day, she was helping to build out networks where you could, if you graduate from this program, have a network of people who are looking for people who have a legal background and are looking to pivot into security. So this is just one example. It was a couple of years ago, but I've started to see a lot more companies trying to build out programs like that, or returnships, they call them. Maybe you've been out of the industry for a while and you're looking to get back in, and there's a path in which you can do that.
Sorry, guys, I lost my mute button there. I'm putting some of those chats on ageism into the chat box now, so that way you guys can navigate to those if you'd like. This next question, again, is kind of following the same path. What advice would you share for an older woman of color who wants to seek a leadership role?
Yeah, so we had started to, I think, talk a little bit about this, about having mentors, and what early on in my career, somebody gifted me a book by Carla Harris. She is probably one of the most prominent African-American business executives. She basically has conquered Wall Street. And one of the things that I picked up from that book is this idea of building your own personal board of directors. So you need to have your mentor, who is the person that you can, who's like your positive person, who you bring questions and they know you, they know the context about you, right? And then can help navigate some of these career discussions. She also talked about having a sponsor. And a sponsor is somebody, typically when decisions are being made in a company about who's getting promoted or who's getting the next leadership role, or even project, a project that has a high impact on the company, sometimes those decisions are being made and you're not in that room when those decisions are being made. It's really important to have somebody who is your sponsor, who will use their political capital to make sure that you get elevated, right? And so I've always taken that away, and over time I have built, this. So spending a lot of time networking, and also remembering that it's not just about me, but it's also about what value can I bring, to this board of directors. So in terms of advice, this would be, if you have those people in your circles that you can tap and just say, hey, just give me good feedback on whether this is a role that you think I would be good at, and just sort of like testing out certain scenarios and understanding how best you can navigate some of these conversations or even that path. And it can be really, we talked about isolation here, it can be really isolating when you look at a leadership team and you don't see somebody who looks like you there or even thriving there. So it's really important to remind yourself that, one, just have the positive affirmation that you're there because you do have skills that are useful, and you do deserve to be at the table. I think it's constantly, even now, I've been in the industry for a long time, but I still will sometimes get into a boardroom and those feelings, they call it, what is it, what I'm looking for? There's a phrase that they use.
Imposter syndrome.
There you go, thank you, yeah. Where there's that little voice, that can sometimes take over your thoughts and say, do I even belong in this room? There's nobody else here who's like me. And just having the positive affirmations like, yeah, I do belong here. There's a reason why I'm here. I've done the work, and I deserve to be at this table just as much as everyone else around me here is. So it's a little bit of, seeking out people who are in that space, who can help navigate those conversations, who have context about you and about the company. And then it's about just having the positive affirmations. And I definitely recommend, people like Carla Harris. I had the chance to watch her live. And anytime that, and I think she's got a lot of YouTube videos, it's just looking for somebody who's going to give you that energy, and to sort of give you momentum into getting into those conversations.
I love that idea of forming your own kind of private board of directors. I think that's a really great way to think about this idea. And I love the idea. We had somebody else that had talked a couple days ago about creating your own opportunities, and especially it's really important for people that they look at the leadership level and don't see people that look like them or don't see a clear path, is by trying to keep pushing and saying like, hey, I'm interested in leadership. Can I take on this team, this team position, or can I supervise this project or spearhead this idea? Making it known that that's what you want can sometimes really be the push that other people need to see you the way you see yourself.
Absolutely.
If you don't speak up, people might not know that you have any aspirations of leadership.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point.
I really love this question. This person had asked, if you could go back and change anything in your professional journey up to this point, would you do anything differently? Why or why not?
Oh, there is so many here, so many nuggets. The first is early on in my career, actually, no, it was when I was in college, I had the chance to either, I started off in the computer science track, but I made the decision to move to an MIS track. And the difference between those two is, CS is computer science, MIS is management information systems. The MIS track has more of a business focus. There's still some technology, basis there and foundation, but there was a business focus. And I did this because when I looked at the just the amount of work that I would have to put into a CS program, and there were, it was also just, I was in college, and my goal was to graduate as quickly as I could, because I realized, if I doubled up and just took a higher course load, then I could get done faster. So that was my priority, was just to get this degree and get out and start contributing into the workforce. But what I found quickly after graduating is that a lot of the things that I had that I didn't do that I missed out on the computer science side, that I was having to play catch up. And so spending a lot of time, doing the basics on my own, whereas if I had stayed on the hard path, the CS path, then maybe I would have saved myself time later. That's one thing. The second is oftentimes when I got into roles, especially early on, I would not pay attention to where my industry was going, or even my business. And it's something that I find a lot with people who are just starting out, where they're not paying attention to the larger trends. They're not really attending all of the company updates, because you're too busy focused on what you need to do in your task, that you forget that you sometimes have to build the path from how the work you're doing impacts the larger company goals, because then that's what makes you a valuable team player. Is that when you're helping a company make decisions, it's not just about what can I do in my little box, it's how does that tie in to the broader goals. And so, some people will refer to it as, being strategic, but I always shy away from using that word, because, it's like you just throw a word strategy out there and it means a little bit different things to, again, can be taken out of context. But at the end of the day, it's just paying attention to what is happening in the industry, and what some of those challenges are that you can then contribute to, or when you're growing your career, it gives you more of a clearer picture on the kinds of skills that you need to be building out. So that was a long answer, but I could talk for hours.
One, and you make a very good point. When you're just starting out, it can be really hard to kind of maintain that long-term vision, and to realize that if you look around you a little bit more, not only do you gain that better kind of sense of where you fit within the organization, but you can then see and have the time and the headspace to think like, okay, this is where I am today, but where is this going? Where do I, how far ahead can I really look here?
Yeah.
I do just want to revisit, we had somebody that asked in the chat if you could tell us the name of the book that you had mentioned on the last question. And I'm so sorry, I didn't think to ask before we went to the next slide.
No problem. It's Expect to Win, Carla Harris. Expect to Win.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you. All right, so this person has a question that was like so in line with today's subject, I was kind of flabbergasted. Their question is, my entire career path, I've taken a non-linear path, but always working for the same company, from operations, engineering, construction, HSE to HR. Now, after 20 plus years, I'm interested in moving companies, but people find it difficult to define what I do. So how do you overcome that issue when you've had an incredibly non-linear career path, or something that seems at least non-traditional to most people?
Yeah, so again, it becomes a question of how are you packaging all of this experience? And, early on in this conversation, we started talking about the power of like your LinkedIn headline, right? Or maybe even your cover letter. I think for a lot of people, especially when you're as a hiring manager, you're under a lot of pressure because you have to, continue to grow your team and also keep things moving. And if you're a recruiter or a sourcer, you're also looking at resumes very quickly, and your eyes are trained to look for very specific things. So, looking at a very rich career of over 20 years of all these different groups or functions, there's probably something that is, or a few things that are consistent over, whether if it's in operations, are you leading teams? Are you creating budgets? Are you building processes? And start to abstract all of that and maybe put that at the top of your resume and say career highlights, right? And then talk about those things that you have done, but make sure they map to what the next role that you're looking to do. I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that your resume and your cover letter and your LinkedIn all tell the story that you are looking to share to the world. It should be able, you should spend some time to look at it and make sure, and even just have other people look at it and say, if I package all this up in this way, does it then translate to this other role that I'm looking at? So it would be just taking out those parts of your experience that are relevant to the next job that you're looking at. That way you are reducing what we call cognitive load on the people who are on the other side, right? It's like, I have so many things to think about. It's almost like this jarring, like, oh, how does this fit into the thing that I'm trying to do now? And you have to make it easy for them to be able to give you a second look, and then bring you in and bring all this rich experience, which I think any company would be lucky to have somebody with that much of a diverse background.
Now, would you say that advice would also be applicable to maybe somebody who's worried about seeming overqualified for a specific position? Or do you think there's a different way to position yourself or position your information then?
Yeah, so this keeps coming up, right, as a theme of when you're moving from one industry to another, that somebody might look at your resume and go, oh, you're overqualified, right? When I left a CISO role and went to information risk manager role in a larger organization, it was having to, I do remember actually specifically somebody asking me this in an interview and saying, would you even be comfortable, doing an IC role and you don't have a team around you? How do you know, or how are you capable of taking on this IC work when and part of that was just removing all of, getting very honest with the interviewer and removing all of the traditional, like, I'm, ensuring that I have a growth mindset and saying, I don't know everything. Yes, I have led teams, but also here's some examples of where I led by showing, how this should be done, right? And I was able to pull specific examples that made them feel more comfortable that I wasn't going to be hired as an individual contributor and then not be able to do the work because I was used to having a team and scale myself with a team versus get the work done on my own. So it gets a little uncomfortable, but I think once you've got specific examples, then that starts to demonstrate that it's not about overqualification, it's about the growth mindset and the kinds of things that I'm looking at for my career.
Yeah, all right. So to round us out here, because I know we only have 5 minutes left, I just want to talk about this other question that we had submitted. This person said, when someone is looking at my resume, how much attention is paid to the years of experience in totality versus the number of positions I've held over the years? And I feel like this is more of a question that, frankly, I've asked several times because I've changed jobs so many times. And I, as one of the older millennials, keep butting up against a generation of job seekers that maybe only held, a couple different positions or just moved up within certain companies. So as this becomes more common, where does that balance lie? Is it something where you need to call attention to the fact that you've spent, the duration of time in all these different roles, or do you really need to focus on the skills learned there?
Yeah, I think it depends on the industry. So, and the types of roles that you are looking at. So when I hire for a lot of technical roles. And so I'm just looking at the question again to make sure that we get the answer that we, versus a number of positions I've held over the years. So what I've seen other resumes, when I'm looking at resume, I've seen people put, if there is experience that is not relevant to the job that they're applying for, that it goes in the summary section on the bottom and says, other roles include it's leading or whatever that experience that they had is put towards the bottom of the resume, and then the rest of the resume at the top is more dedicated to these are all the skills that I have, and here are the accomplishments that I've had in the 3 most recent jobs, and that way you're focusing you're giving the real estate to the wonderful things that you've done more recently and how that ties into the job that you're applying for today. And also at the same time, honoring the fact that, I spent 10 years working in another industry, and here's a little bit of the stuff that I learned that might not be important to you right now, but might be something that you are interested in hearing about. And then that way you're again, it's, this idea of reducing cognitive load. You don't want them to get distracted by all this other stuff. So it might just, be good for you to mention it, not spend too much time on it, but focus on the things that make them understand how your experience fits in with the role they're looking to fill today.
Yeah, I think that's really a good thing to focus on is making it relatable, reducing that cognitive load, and just explaining yourself as quickly and efficiently as you can. People don't have very long to spend on each individual candidate, unfortunately. And so doing that as seamlessly as possible is going to help you in the long run.
Yeah.
All right. So these chats always seem to not last long enough. The hour just flies by, honestly. But before we leave here, I do just want to ask you, you talked about what your favorite part about is about your role today with us, but could you tell us what your favorite part is about working at Chainalysis?
Yeah, I have amazing coworkers. I started in January, and I was a little, I had just come off of another job, and so starting to forge new relationships, and then boom, we all went to work from home. And I was really concerned, coming in as a leader of an organization and not having the opportunity to build those relationships in my mind the way I thought I would be doing it was, one-on-ones in person, walk-in talks and that kind of thing. But what I really have found is the team at Chainalysis, people are very open to having, we have lots of like social events. And sometimes they're very spontaneous. So we'll either, somebody will do coffee chats. We'll have the famous Zoom happy hours. We had something called a huddle, where traditionally a huddle is where the entire company gets together in one location, one physical location, and spends a couple of days, talking about strategic planning and then just building those connections. And this year, of course, we couldn't travel anywhere. So it was my first one. It was a virtual one. And the team just put out just an amazing program together, such that I feel like I really know my coworkers, even though they're people I have never met in person, right? I might not be able to, if I saw them on the street, I might not be able to recognize them because they're not like in a little frame and with a Zoom icon on the corner there. But I've been able to build quite a good relationship so far. And that to me is just an indicator of the quality of people that Chainalysis is attracting. And it's just, you know, it's amazing the things that will keep you there when times are hard is those relationships that you've built out. And so I'm really thankful for that.
Well, thank you so much, Betsy, for joining us today. I'm really, really grateful that you took time out of your day to spend with our community. And thank you so much to all of our attendees who wrote in such amazing questions, people that came off mute to comment during today's session, people that wrote in questions during the session. Is there anything that you want to leave us with before we sign off for the day?
That's always the hard question for me to answer, because there's so many things. You know, there's a lot of questions here about transitioning and about, you know, bringing rich experiences into new companies or maybe new careers. As long as you remember that this COVID is not going to last, and to, you know, sort of just think about what this new normal will look like, and take this opportunity to maybe, you know, spend time and give yourself the space to think about what is important to you, what do you want to get out of it. I do a lot of journaling, and I found it really helpful when I have things on paper to be more objective, and I've removed the noise from my brain and onto a piece of paper, and that gives me some clarity. So if I can leave with anything is, you know, write it down, get it out of your head, and then get an action plan.
Thank you for that. I do just want to call out one last time, Chainalysis is hiring. I put some links further up in the chat where you can check out their company page. You can check out what roles they have there, and you can apply via PowerToFly if you'd like. That puts an extra layer of, you know, kind of follow up at the end of your application. So it's a really good place to make sure that, you know, if you don't know anybody at the company, or you want to make sure that you don't get lost in the shuffle, that is a great way to go. Thank you so much. Again, it was really lovely to speak with you today. And I'm super excited to hopefully see more of you all that joined us today on future chats. So thanks so much. And I hope you have a pleasant rest of your Thursday.
You too. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.